Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, April 12, 2018. All managers are present except Manager Shackleton, who is attending a district-sponsored meeting in Minneapolis tonight about the Minnehaha Creek FEMA repairs, the coordinated work there. The first item of business is reappointment of Manager Rogness and Manager White, who have been appointed by Hennepin County to this Board of Managers. Reappointment. Mr. Smith.
Managers, if you would stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Sherry White, Rogness,
Sherry White.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the constitutions
that I will uphold the constitutions
of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of manager
of the office of manager
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you.
We'll turn to matters from the floor and begin with our annual update from Hennepin County by Commissioner Callison. We always look forward to you being here. Thanks for coming, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members and staff. I don't usually get to see the swearing in, so how nice to be here tonight, and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
I brought some handouts along, and I thought by way of an update, I'd speak to the handouts, and as always, happy to take your questions as well. So they are wrapped in our handy budget book for 2018, so if you need some light reading at night, that's available for you. But the next item is just informational. It's really the workforce data for Hennepin County. I thought you might find it informative to see the breakdown. First, the total number of employees, 9,000 in Hennepin County. The breakdown, employees of color, 28%, female employees, 62%. You'll notice that the baby boomers are beginning to be pushed out of the workforce, as I think some of us are realizing. And you also see that with that comes a tremendous loss of institutional knowledge that we're expecting, as in the next 5 years, we expect 56% of our directors to be eligible for retirement, and in 10 years that goes to 62%. So we're clearly looking at some changes in Hennepin County and preparing ourselves with different initiatives around the workforce and initiatives to make sure that we're an employer of choice. Then the next item is our legislative priorities and platform, and really I think the most important things would be the 6 priorities at the top. And among those, the most important is the Regional Medical Examiner's Facility. I think I've spoken with you about that before. We have the current facility located in downtown Minneapolis, quite small, difficult location, and we need to provide a better facility for a medical examiner. We have identified land on the county home school in Minnehaha. We are asking for bonding from the state, $26 million, approximately. That's half the cost of the facility. We provide services for Scott and Dakota County, and increasingly these services are provided regionally. So we need room both for current demand and then for the future of medical examining as well. And one of the issues with the medical examining facility, and the reason we need a bigger facility, is because of the opioid epidemic. So I brought a sheet about that as well. You don't have time to read it right now, but in Hennepin County, since 2012 up until early this year, overdoses have killed roughly 700 people. So 700 people since 2012. We expect that we will have more than 230 residents claimed by opioids in 2020. So a startling increase, as you know, in Hennepin County as well as nationally. And we understand this to be really a public health issue. So certainly you hear about Narcan and you hear about what happens when somebody overdoses, but we also think in terms of treatment and prevention and all those other tools that you have in the public health toolbox. So we have looked at our processes at Hennepin County. We hope to have somebody in place from within the county to really make sure that we've got the coordination that we need across the county. But we know that this is a long-term issue in Hennepin County. We're going to have to mobilize to deal with it. The other item I brought along is something about organics, and this isn't directly relatable to the Watershed District, but we are looking at changes to our recycling ordinance to encourage more organics recycling. This is consistent with state goals that we have and also with what we hear from our residents in terms of the interest in organics. And so the idea is to ask our cities to make sure that people have the option to do organics, not require a household to do organics, but make sure if they want to opt in, they can, as well as some of the businesses that we think are more likely to be contributors to organics. We are in the process of making those revisions now, working closely with cities, because there's a wide range of responsiveness and concern about organics in Hennepin County. So I bring this with me as I talk to cities to let them know this is the time to share concerns or observations for the county, and we're very interested in that. And then I brought along a little organics recycling guide for you. And I have done organics at my home in Minnehaha for 10 years through a commercial service where I simply bundle the organics in the bag that they provide. I put it in my trash can. There's not another truck coming down my street. It's very simple. And so some of those myths around organics need to be exploded. And this is perhaps one way to do that, but it's a remarkable variety of items that you can put in your organics recycling. So those were the updates I brought along. The other thing I wanted to mention certainly is our pleasure to deal with you on the cold storage site and our appreciation to be involved in that process. So with that, Madam Chair, I would say I'm happy to take your questions, but I will not prolong your meeting either.
Thank you so much. I note that on page 2 of the priorities listing, you talk about ensuring that Hennepin County receives a fair share of revenues from the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment. We're very happy to be a partner with Hennepin County in clean water issues, so that we appreciate seeing that.
You're welcome.
Do managers have questions for Commissioner Callison? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks again.
We'll move to approval of the agenda. I want to change the order in which a couple of items are heard to accommodate guests here this evening. We'll take item 10.4 and make it essentially 10.0 under action items. That will come directly after the permit. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Those in favor, I'll have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Manager Becker, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Robbins, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under information items and correspondence, we have introduction of a new MCWD staff member, Ms. Joan Lee.
President White, managers, I'm Dana Jonley, and I'm the new project and land management technician at the district. My educational background is in natural resources. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in botany and conservation biology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then I also have an MPS in horticulture with an ecological restoration emphasis from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I kind of started my natural resource career path at Ramsey, Washington Metro Watershed District. I was an intern. After that, I was at Prairie Resto for a few years, and then most recently, I was at Natural Shore Technologies, where I had the joy of working on President White's shoreline restoration. I had a pretty big gap in between my undergraduate and my graduate degree, and I kind of went from someone who very ideally had high ideals about land conservation and habitat conservation and gobbling it all up and saving everything. And as that time has passed and things have evolved, there is no land left. And so I've come to believe in a concept called reconciliation ecology, which you may not be familiar with that term, you're definitely familiar with the concept, which is basically stating that we're creating and maintaining natural landscapes within our given structures. So that basically mirrors the balanced urban ecology policy that you guys adopted in 2014.
That's for sure.
So I'm really excited to kind of found that home and look forward to advancing the district's goals and that policy. Right now I'm working on O&M manual updates while Old Man Winter's still out there. I'm really looking forward to getting out and starting site inspections and doing dam operations. Hopefully have an aerator out there next week and get the dam open and start regulating flow into the creek.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Nice to have you
Good luck.
here. I'm going to loop back to matters from the floor. I know that we have at least one member of the public who'd like to address the board.
Nice to see everybody again.
Good to
Nice
see
to
you.
see the same people again.
as you know, we need your name and address for the record.
I'm Gabriel Jabor, 985 Tonkawa Road, Orland, Minnesota, 55356. I'm here to, I know this item is on the agenda, and I'll be brief and move on. Everything in the proposed master plan that the city have presented you seemed to be something we thought of and thought should be done earlier on when we worked with you on the easement. That was that vision that we shared. Unfortunately, after 10 years of experience, we found out that we all wanted to be rowing in that direction, and that we couldn't. Like we had functioning bathroom and we failed miserably, and things like that, and the services out there literally is very difficult to do. The reason I'm here is not to object to it or tell you not to approve it. I'm here to be on the record, so in the future we could say we talked about it instead of, well, I remember, well, it was said. That I don't see the city of Warner have ever, since the last election, have made commitment to the island. It's all about Mirage, and it was initiated by storming City Hall with a veteran to see where we are. In February 2016, they made a motion to get rid of the docks and swim to the beach. That was the chair of the Big Island Committee comments. The thing that disturbs me the most is if we are to have such amenities, the city is on record. They have no intention to spend a penny on maintaining it, keeping it in place. If you only read their minutes, to their credit, they're very outspoken about it. So with somebody's money, could be yours, could be the veteran, could be, they have already asked the veteran for money. They're planning to make all those activities occur. Nobody knows better than I do, with close to 50 years experience on the water, what it costs to have an island home or an island property. So I only would like to see the board be a little bit cautious on if this does occur, how do we pump the sewage? How do we, are they willing to commit to the cost affiliated with it? And it's nice for people who have zero experience to dream up how to get things done. I hate to think that we are leaving time bounds for future council and future generation. So I only ask you guys during your approval process that you express concerns because they have not chosen to visit the people who have experience and ask them what happened to the bathroom, what happened when you need to pump this, what happened to the signs. I personally drove signs 7 feet in the ground, and with Public Works, sometimes we poured concrete 5 feet in the ground, and every single sign was put on with bolt and nuts, and I've taken motorized welder and welded the nuts so you cannot, and they ripped them all out. Picnic tables were stuck in the ice in the middle of the lake. I brought back about close to 150 picnic tables back. They became navigation hazard. The bathrooms, satellite toilets were floating in the middle of the lake. So things like that, you know. So the plan is beautifully visualized, executing it and maintaining it and making sure it doesn't go from an asset to liability, require a commitment. And it would be nice to see the city put, let's say, $100,000 in their budget annually to do it, 200, because it is really tiring to keep asking individuals, you know, to come in and do 100 years deferred liability. We removed at no cost to the city all the buildings. We had grants. Mr. Jim White, who was the mayor at the time, giving awards to people, but many, many people help with it. Well, you could do that once or twice, but you can't do it forever. So what you put there might end up being a problem for the future. That's the only thing I would like to be on the record for. That I like to see A, the city match all grants, minimum, and B, the city would have contractual agreement with the grantor that they will maintain it. You know, so that's, you know, when DNR get a grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife for public access, they guarantee that access is going to be open, it'll be unfettered access, and it's going to be maintained. They're not going to go back and say, it didn't work out, thanks for the money.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr. Jabbour.
And thank you for the extra few minutes.
I didn't keep the timer running, did I? No. Next time. On the consent agenda, we have two items: approval of the minutes of March 8th, 2018, and March 22nd, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? President's report. Manager Rognus and I were reappointed on 7-0 votes. And I take that as a vote of confidence in the work that the Watershed District is doing. And that doesn't happen without an engaged and cooperative board, staff, consultants, and our citizens advisors. So I thank everyone for the work that everyone does for this district. In the last 3 weeks since our previous meeting, I've attended the joint working group with managers Miller and Loftus, and the Southwest LRT Blake Road Subcommittee with Manager Miller. Mr. Heyman will be making a presentation later with an action item, and I'll leave the substance of those to him. And 2 days ago, Manager Miller and I were at the State of the County address that Commissioner Callison gave, sitting like this, so it felt very familiar. Toward the end of her comments, she said that she quoted a comment from one of their citizen, I can't think what they call it, citizen education groups, that this person said, I don't want to have a pretty good county. I want to have the best county. And I want to have a county that takes risks and a county that is creative, innovative. And so Manager Miller and I looked at each other and we nodded because we thought those sounded like good things. Thus endeth the report. Operations and Programs Committee, Manager Loftus.
Thank you, President White, or I'm sorry, yeah. We followed the agenda, so we received an update on 325, specifically the RFQ selection process and the demolition process. And we also briefly discussed benefits and an HR update, and those items, actually all 3 items are ongoing. No specific recommendations for action this evening, but all of those items will continue to be on our committee agendas in the coming months.
Thank you. Are there any other reports or events that managers would like to remark on? Thank you. The upcoming meeting and event schedule is listed in our agenda, and we need to be scheduling an executive committee coming up soon to talk about the legislative update. I can coordinate that going forward, but we do know that Mr. Carlson is available to meet with us on the 26th at our next meeting. We could do that. Manager Miller, would that work for you? To have our government relations consultant came in on the 26th for an executive committee meeting and then presenting to the board?
Sure.
Okay, we'll just schedule that then. I take that as a committee, a majority vote there. Next item of business is 9.1, permit 17-584. This is from Metropolitan Council Environmental Services, Ms. Quinn.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. This evening I am presenting permit 17584
requirement at the same location within the channel as well, which I'll discuss in detail at the end of my presentation. So as an outline of what we'll go over this evening, give you some background about the project, the rules that have been analyzed for the permit application, and then conclude with a staff recommendation. So to kind of show you where we are in the district, the L38 interceptor line runs largely along County Road 44. It does kind of go through the cities of Mound in the north, which is technically West Edge Boulevard, until it crosses over Bartlett, becomes County Road 44 in the city of Minnetrista. And then it is proposed to take a kind of jaunt east through the Lake Minnetonka Regional Park, and then continue east on Highway 7 through Victoria as well. So this is just kind of to show you, this is a pretty large linear project, but approximately I think about 4 miles or so. So I'll kind of try to show you where we are in the district as I walk through the rules as well to kind of keep us all on the same page. Okay, so in addition to the rules that are triggered, the stormwater management rule is not applied to this project because it is a linear project that creates less than 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. The road is actually proposed to replace with no increase in impervious surface. There will be a permanent cleanout structure located on this parcel, which is highlighted. So this is the channel. Halstead Bay would be the water body would go to the north here, Peace Bay to the side. There'd be a concrete slab associated with that cleanout structure, which is approximately 350 square feet. Per our rules and the way we analyze that, we did not associate that new impervious surface to be part of the linear component of how we apply the stormwater management rule. So looking at it as a new development, since this is an undeveloped parcel, less than an increase of 20% new impervious surface is not required to treat for stormwater management. So the district's erosion control rule is triggered for land disturbance of 5,000 square feet or 50 cubic yards of excavation or fill. The project will disturb approximately 13 acres of land. I have provided the erosion control plan in your packet with the permit report. Since this is quite a long, extensive linear project, I've left out quite a few of the visuals just because it doesn't quite work with the PowerPoint. But they have provided these BMPs, erosion control BMPs throughout the entire corridor. So the appropriate silt fence, floated silt curtain within the water where needed, biologs inlet protection, construction entrances, location concrete washout, a plan for final stabilization, and a NPDS permit. There's a typo on there, I apologize. Will be submitted once it is obtained, as listed in the recommendation, a condition of recommended approval. So the applicant has shown that the erosion control rule is met. Moving on to wetland protection, as I kind of showed on that large site map, County Road 44 is surrounded by water on both sides for large portions of it. Additionally, there are several wetlands throughout the corridor. 20 wetlands were delineated within kind of the entire project boundary. 18 of those wetlands are within the right-of-way or permanent easements. Per the district's rule, the wetland buffers provision of the rule are triggered whenever water body crossings and structures rule are triggered. And for a linear project, buffers are provided to the greatest extent of the right-of-way. So here I just took an example, which is the entire plan, so it is also included in the permit report packet, of how they have demonstrated providing buffer to the greatest extent of the right-of-way. So for example, with this buffer, is adjacent to wetland 10 would be a preserved wetland requiring a 75-foot buffer if we weren't analyzing it as a linear project. So they did kind of, to show it, right, they showed like where it would be and then what they're providing, so what they're able to remedy. And they did this throughout the entire corridor for all 18 of those wetlands. Areas that the buffer is proposed to be disturbed will be decompacted and reseeded per the rule.
The district has a existing cooperative agreement for maintenance with Hennepin County for stormwater and wetland buffers. So the long-term maintenance requirements are fulfilled by that, and this buffer exhibit then will also be added to the district's database for tracking those maintenance requirements. So for those 20, I should back up for a minute, for those 20 wetlands that were delineated, the City of Mound and MCD, on behalf of the City of Victoria as the LGU, waived WACA authority to the City of Minnetrista, so that the City of Minnetrista is the LGU for all wetlands within this project corridor. The City of Minnetrista did issue an NOD that confirmed the boundary and type and location of all 20 wetlands, and then they also issued another notice of decision confirming that the impacts associated with the storm sewer replacements within these 18 wetlands qualify to meet a utilities exemption and therefore are not required to provide mitigation through, replacement through mitigation because of the utilities exemption. With that utilities exemption, the Wetland Conservation Act does not regulate excavation in type 2 wetlands. However, the district's wetland protection rule regulates excavation in all types of wetlands. And so there is excavation proposed that was not approved within the issued utilities exemption within a type 2 wetland. The excavation would be approximately about 200 square feet. It will not alter the wetland type. It alters less than a half acre. And it is for the replacement of the storm sewer utility. The district's rule, while it does regulate excavation in all types of wetlands, it does recognize all of WACA, and there are no loss in exemptions that they would apply. So the district did look at if this excavation would qualify as the utilities excavation if it were to be regulated through WACA. And it does meet that as it's needed for the utility, and the applicant has demonstrated that they really minimize the impact to the greatest extent. So therefore, per the district's rule, replacement is not required as it would qualify to meet the utilities exemption. So with those two components, with the buffers being met and the excavation, with the exception of the request for the variance for the buffers applied around wetland 6, which is where the structure will be located, all other aspects of the wetland protection will have been met. Moving on to shoreline stabilization, there are 2 locations where 3 culverts are proposed to be replaced and within the bank of Lake Minnehaha, and the stabilization of the bank will be different from from existing to proposed conditions. Therefore, the district shoreline stabilization rule is applied. So, kind of to orientate you a little bit again. Be referring to this as the Sinclair site. These 2 sites will also have floodplain alteration, which I will cover next, to kind of keep these 2 locations in mind. So, in this site, I think kind of the closest address is like 3830 Conrad 44, but we're kind of just south of Bartlett, if that kind of helps us a little bit here. And then the second site is just a little bit further south of that, where you can see there's not a lot of space between the road and the lake there. So that's the second location where there's actually 2 culverts that are proposed to be replaced and stabilized. So the applicant is proposing to stabilize both of these locations with a bioengineering stabilization. One of the products that's commonly known as Fleximat. These are just 2 pictures I grabbed from their website to kind of help you visualize what that looks like. I would say that these projects were just recently installed due to the fact that the grass isn't very high, and it looks like there might still be a silt curtain on that top picture. But the bioengineering technique that they are proposing, known as flexing that, is kind of they're concrete blocks, and then they provide about 1.5 foot spacing between them, and it's all kind of on like a grid interlocked, so it gets pressed into the shoreline, and then it will be revegetated with some native seed mixes that the district staff have approved, allowing for that vegetation then to establish and grow up through there. Per the district shoreline rule, the stabilization practice allowed is kind of dictated by what your erosion intensity score comes in at. Both of these site locations came back with a low score, which would point towards to just biological stabilization and no hard armoring at all. So with those scores, the applicant has requested to apply design flexibility, which is in section 5 of the rule, and has provided, so the applicant can request that when they think that the erosion intensity score may have come back lower than what the actual site conditions may be, based on specific site constraints or conditions, and provide kind of an alternatives analysis to show that what they're proposing still represents the most minimal impact solution in regards to natural resource degradation. With that, they did provide an alternatives analysis, and I'm going to kind of flip back up to these slides real quick, just to explain this a little bit more. So the purpose of the shoreline stabilization is because these culverts are being replaced. And they do need some energy dissipation at the outfall of them to prevent erosion and scouring of the bank. So this is the one culvert here, and this kind of, I don't have a scale on here, but the stabilization is just proposed kind of at the culvert area. And then on the second site, you have 2 culverts. So you've got a larger area here. So this is all proposed to be stabilized with that. And as I'll kind of show you in the next rule analysis, there is also floodplain alteration proposed in this area. And so for not only based on the velocities coming out of these pipes requiring a little bit more than just a biological stabilization, this area is proposed to be disturbed. And given kind of, as you can see, our proximity and contours of the road to the lake here, they proposed doing bioengineering. The alternatives they provided were to do just straight riprap hard armoring, or look at just doing biological stabilization. And with the velocities coming out of those pipes, biological stabilization only isn't deemed to be appropriate to kind of do the short-term and long-term stabilization of those pipes. So therefore, staff find that they've provided adequate justification to show that biological engineering would be the preferred practice at these sites based on those specific site conditions. Additionally, I should add that this geogrid matting product, if you will also be installed in conformance with the design criteria as listed in the rule for bioengineered stabilization, so no more than 3 feet waterborne through no more than 3 months slope. And so the criteria they have provided does meet the rule. So kind of going back again to that same Sinclair site then, where they're proposing one of the sites for the bioengineered stabilization. The replacement of this culvert also requires fill to be brought in to stabilize that pipe and make sure it doesn't get exposed. So they're bringing in 3.5 cubic yards of fill. The areas in red show where they're providing that floodplain mitigation, and so that there's no loss in floodplain storage there. The floodplain alteration rule is triggered for any work that occurs below the 100-year floodplain elevation, which is 931.5 for Lake Minnehaha. The second site is back to that LS8 site where the 2 culverts are proposed to be replaced, and the green area is where the fill is proposed. The red area is where the cut is proposed. Both these sites will result in an increase of 5 cubic yards of floodplain storage for the area. There are other areas throughout the corridor where a storm sewer replacement will result in land disturbance within the floodplain. However, there's no net fill proposed at these areas as existing contours will be maintained from existing to proposed conditions. So therefore, mitigation not required. So the applicant has demonstrated that the floodplain alteration rule is met. I'm going to break water body crossings up and structures into kind of 2 different components. For the rule, any kind of structure, utility, bridge that comes in contact with the better bank of a water course or water body, the rule is applied. There are 26 storm sewer replacements throughout the entire corridor. 19 of those do come in contact with either the bank of Lake Minnehaha or the bank of Wetland. And then after this, I'm going to transition then into the crossing portion of the tunneling, so kind of break them up a little bit that way. So per the district's rule, when you use the bank of a water body, you have to demonstrate that there is a specific need for work in public waters, that it has to be a public benefit. These are the replacement of a public utility, therefore the demonstrated need is met. Hydraulic capacity has to be retained. The district's engineer did look at all 19 of these replacements to ensure that there would not be any decreases in the 100-year flood stage upstream or downstream. There were 3 locations that we required a bit more work between us and the applicant to demonstrate that they wouldn't be increasing or having a negative effect on the hydraulic capacity, where they were changing the pipe material and also changing the invert elevation. Navigation and aquatic and wildlife passages will be maintained from the existing to proposed conditions. Water quality will not be negatively affected, as there will be the appropriate erosion control practices in place during construction, and then all the outfalls will be stabilized either with riprap when the velocities show that a product like Hexanet is not appropriate, or when the velocities were lowered, the applicant worked with us a lot by pulling riprap out of some of the wetlands and putting Hexanet product down instead where it was allowed. They also showed that the replacement of the storm sewer structures meets the minimal impact solution by providing 2 design alternatives, one being a no-build scenario, which does not meet the goals of the project, which were to upgrade the utilities and the materials to be in conformance with Hennepin County standards, and also to address local areas of flooding that have been identified. The other alternative considered was to relocate the pipes from the existing areas, which have the potential to result in greater natural resource impact given the abundance of wetlands and lake that surround County Road 45. So I'll show you where we are again. So the crossing will be at this parcel is where the tunnel pit is proposed for the crossing. Underneath the channel, this is, I don't know how familiar you folks are with this area in Minnehaha, but this is pretty much like the Eagle Bluff subdivision development. This is a property parcel that they actually own. They have a portion of it in a temporary and permanent easement.
Can I interrupt and ask a question at this point? You know, I have great confidence in the Metro Council's Environmental Services Department, and they and their predecessor, Minneapolis St. Paul Sanitary Sewer District, has done a phenomenal job for 80 years. But I think it's 10 or 15 years ago we had an interceptor with a water bottom crossing that was it, well, at least from the residents' point of view, it was a disaster. I don't remember what happened, whether it undermined a house near the crossing, and you know, the poor gentleman that was the owner was here every month trying to get us to close down the project or fix it or whatever. I don't remember what the details were, but I remember it was a big mess. And are we going to run into a similar problem, whatever that problem was, at this crossing here?
With the tunneling underneath the channel,
Mhm.
it's not into, I guess I'd like you to kind of rephrase your question, Manager Miller.
Do you remember what the problem was on a?
It's not ranking the development manager,
Okay.
but the managers, the Metropolitan Council, they shouldn't have that issue here. It'll be all underground, they'll be deep enough. They're doing redundant pipes as well, so they
Okay.
should be very well covered in this process.
How far down?
It's 3 to 5 feet underneath the channel.
12 feet,
Yeah.
and 12 feet below that.
As a point of clarity, the complexity there is that they took out a bridge and had to rebuild a bridge
Okay,
to connect the road, so
I know it was something.
those residents,
A whole bunch of people.
better part of 2 years didn't have a connected road.
Well, and then there was actually footings of a house were settling and everything else because of,
Yeah.
so, okay, thank you.
Back to you.
This bridge is not being, it's a new bridge, so it's not gonna go anywhere.
So here's a screenshot from the plan set as well. This is also included in the permit report packet. So it's not marked up well, but here's the channel, the existing bridge. There's no proposed work to be done to the bridge or the abutments.
Right.
Here's the location of the proposed tunnel pit to the south. The northern tunnel pit is actually about 200 feet this way, so on the print sheet. And then here you have the line going underneath the channel and your cross section as well. So they do provide, about 12 feet of clearance. Our rule requires 3 for sanitary line. Excuse me, you do have to have a redundancy. They have shown that with a double pipe for redundancy to prevent a sanitary discharge. As the tunneling will be below the bed of the channel, there will not be any change to hydraulic capacity navigation or wildlife passages from existing to proposed conditions. Water quality will not be negatively affected as they have provided not only the redundancy with the sanitary line, but also the appropriate erosion control measures while they are doing the tunneling as well. And they also have provided an alternatives analysis to show that this proposed technique and location represent the most minimal impact solution. One option as is proposed as a no-build situation. Met Council has done some testing and studies to identify that there is a need to replace these pipes to prevent them from failing. Also looked at doing an open trench, which is more disruptive than tunneling underneath the channel in regards to natural resources. And then finally, per the rule, the entrances and exits for the tunneling are required to be 100 feet away from the bank of the channel. As I mentioned, the northern one is about 200 feet away, so that is met. The southern one here is what they're requesting a variance for. This tunnel pit location is approximately about 52 feet away from the bank of the channel. And with that, the only other outstanding item, which is listed as a condition in the recommended approval, would be a maintenance agreement between Hennepin County and the district for maintenance of structure structures. All other aspects of the will have been met. Moving on to the variance request, so as I just mentioned, the applicant is requesting a variance to place the tunnel pit about 52 feet away from the bank of the channel. This is due to the location of the existing bridge and abutments, which I've been told was installed in about the 1920s. Additionally, there's the location, it doesn't show up on the slide, on the other side of the road, a natural gas line. And then the contours aren't overlaid on this, but if you folks are familiar, if the board is familiar with this area at all, there's very steep contours that go down from the road kind of to this parcel of land, which also limits the ability to move the tunnel pit further back away from the channel, which actually would result in greater land grading and disruption to that vegetated area. So to request a variance, the applicant has to demonstrate that these are special site conditions to the property, that they do not create the hardship, that it will not merely serve as a convenience, there's no feasible or prudent alternative, and that it will not be contrary to the rules. As analyzed in the alternatives analysis for the crossing, the applicant has demonstrated that there is a need to replace the sanitary line based on the existing site conditions, locating the tunnel pit here with redundant erosion control measures in place, which has the least amount of disturbance, not only to the channel won't be disturbed. There is a small portion of, this is wetland 6, that will be impacted by this tunnel pit. Sheet piling will be installed on the small area here. And those impacts have been approved in the utilities exemption and will be restored to the pre-existing conditions, if not better, as we stated in that notice of decision. And then the applicant, furthermore, is then requesting also a variance from the minimal applied buffer width when buffer averaging was applied. So as we did not consider this clean-out structure to be linear, the full scale of the buffer width requirements applied to the project. Wetland 6 is a preserved wetland, which would require a 75-foot buffer. They have provided us with kind of a nice diagram here to kind of help you visually try to see this. So here's the wetland edge. If a 75-foot buffer were to be applied to the area, it would be in this light blue line here, which intersects with the road. And then this is where there are some proposed wood stairs to get down to the clean-out structure. And the purpose of the clean-out structure is to be able to service the sanitary line in the event it ever needs to be repaired or drained. And they're requesting right here is they have a minimum pinch point of 15 feet, where the rule would only allow 50%, which would be 37.5 feet. And then kind of based on that area, when we do buffer averaging, when we look at maintaining minimums and maximums for projects like this, we look at what the area would be of the buffer if the buffer were to be met, the width were to be met at all of the, maintain at the minimum and maximum points. And so that's where these numbers come from. So if a 75-foot buffer width was provided throughout this area, that would be 8,633 square feet. Based on the placement of the clean-out structure, the associated riprap that will be there to stabilize the structure long-term, and the stairs, they're only able to provide 8,078 square feet of buffer area, which is about a shortfall of just about 500 square feet. So that is where they're requesting a variance from meeting the minimum applied buffer width for 15 feet through the buffer averaging. The variance criteria was also analyzed very similarly to the request for the setback. The clean-out structure will be located within where that excavation will take place. So here's the tunnel pit. And we've got steep contours, so moving it back further would actually, they're already gonna have this all dug up. So to minimize disturbance on this property, they're gonna put the permanent structure where it is. And with the steep slopes, moving it back further, more grading, more land disturbance. Additionally, this is the line of where their permanent easement goes to about here. Their temporary easement goes to about here, and that's their land rights that they required for that area. And so with that, staff feel that they have demonstrated that these are constraints specific to the site, that they didn't create this hardship. It's not to use convenience. The intent of the rule will still be met, as this entire area will be reseeded and maintained as wetland buffer with a native seed mix. And staff feel like that they've provided appropriate justification. So in conclusion, Met Council and Hennepin County have applied their permit application triggers the district's erosion control, wetland protection rule, streaming and shoreline stabilization rule, floodplain alteration rule, water body crossings and structures rule, and staff feel they have provided adequate justification for the variance request. Staff recommend approval of the permit with the conditions as listed in the report, which is submission of the maintenance agreement for water body crossings and structures, identification of the contractor responsible for maintaining the erosion control plan, providing the district with proof that they have acquired the land use rights to work on properties outside of the right-of-way, submission of an NPDS number, and then one item that was not included in the permit report that I would like to add to the staff recommendation for approval with the condition is that the permit be valid for 2 years based on the timeline associated with such a large linear project. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are the representatives of the permit applicant here? And if so, do you have anything you'd like to add in Ms. Quinn's report?
I don't have anything to add.
All right, thank you. May I first have a motion to approve the variance for the reasons articulated in the report?
Move approval.
Manager
Second.
Miller, a second by Manager Olson. Is there any discussion or questions about the variance? Manager Olson?
Quick question, where you showed the stairs going down, those are all out in the open, right? They're all daylit? So,
Manager Olson, they're wood stairs.
yep. And then what kind of a structure is that the riprap is around? Is that a flat plate? I'm assuming that's not a building or...
So Manager Olson, to my knowledge, is like a concrete slab.
Right.
Outlined in the dark outline, and then the riprap around it. We are looking more detail.
No, that's what I wanted, it
Yep,
was just
it's a
flat
flat
with the ground.
concrete
Okay, thank you.
Manager Miller?
It just occurred to me, because I don't know Lake Minnehaha that well, that with all these islands that are connected in various places with homes on it and stuff, how do they move the sewage without lake crossings on all those places? It seems to me this is just an enormous issue out there on a
Septic systems on the island.
septic. Okay, I'm talking about the ones that are all connected by road and all
Oh.
that stuff. So,
I don't know if this answers the question, but I know that in the city of Orno, there are 38 lift stations.
okay,
And all around the lake community, there are lift
All right.
stations. Is that the correct number that you remember, 38?
Close, you could ask if you had them, but yeah, 46. Yeah.
46, thank you. I was low.
There you go.
okay.
Any other questions for
okay,
Ms. Quinn?
Wow.
Did I cut you off?
It's an expensive
No,
system.
All those in favor of the variance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, the permit with all the conditions, including the added 2-year length of the permit and the variance. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Manager Rodman, seconded by Manager Miller. Any discussions or questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll start providing camelbacks for these presentations. All right, I made that up, that's not true. We'll go to what has been noted here as item 10.4, Resolution 18039, and we have Laura Damjancic.
First, we'd like to provide a brief overview of the proposed improvements of the plan as previously discussed at the March 23rd board meeting, and note some minor revisions made by the City of Warren. Second, to touch on some specific points that easement restriction and guidance the management plan provides on three separate items. One, the proposed restroom facilities at the park. Two, the proposed picnic area within the natural area of the park. And also, three, the prevention of illegal vehicle access and use of that park. Lastly, we'll provide an overview of recent district and City of Orono staff coordination and the timeline of future engagement. Adam Edwards, the city's public works director, city engineers, and can answer any questions that you might have about the phasing of the improvements, the improvements themselves, and coordination and approval, the approval process. As discussed at the March 23rd meeting, the City of Orono has developed a concept plan for improvements within the Minnehaha Nature Park, where the district holds an easement over the entirety of the park, the entire 56 acres. Those proposed improvements include converting existing trails for ADA accessibility and establishing a new ADA trail access to the eastern portion of the island, constructing a single restroom facility within the recreation area, installing parkwide security measures, refurbishing an existing building to use as a simple visitor center, establishing a veterans memorial within the park, placing trail bollards to prevent vehicle access, and also establishing overlook areas and picnic areas. Recent revisions to this plan since we saw it last in March was to outline the district's easement, that's the heavy black dotted line around the perimeter of the property, and also to call out the locations of existing buildings within the property. This is the proposed action analysis that was in your packet as well as it was on March 23rd. And that proposed action analysis essentially calls out pieces of the plan individually, notes whether they are proposed within the natural area of the easement, the recreation area of the easement, or both, the restrictions that the conservation easement places on those activities, and then additional guidance the management plan provides based on that document. There are three items I'd like to discuss and speak to specifically based on staff and legal counsel analysis of the easement. The proposed restroom facilities, the proposed picnic tables within Point Charming Beach within the natural area, and also the proposed trail bollards. Staff's recommendation is to approve the master plan in concept, and it's conditioned on the city's addressing these specific items. First, constructing the restroom facilities within the recreation area towards the center of the park. The establishment of a restroom facility is allowed under the easement and is provided for in the easement. However, the management plan for the park notes that the feasibility of providing restroom facilities should be considered based on the history of vandalism to earlier restroom facilities within the park and the level of recreational facilities within the park if it's actually warranted. Another concern that has been raised is the complexity involving inspecting and pumping and refurbishing the existing septic system on the island and connecting that to new facilities and the long-term maintenance of those facilities. Staff recommends that the board approve master plan and concept, but direct the city to establish the need for facilities and a plan for long-term maintenance. Second, the proposed installation of picnic tables on Point Charming Beach. This is something that we discussed March 23rd as well. The easement states that no structures or improvements are to be placed within the natural area, and Point Charming Beach falls within that natural area. And the management plan notes that such features are to be made vandal-proof. Staff recommends that the board approve the master plan and concept, but to have the City of Orono assess the need and level of improvement that would be provided by putting picnic tables within that area, as opposed to grassy picnic locations as recommended in the management plan, and then to come back to the board with that assessment of need and level of improvement for a separate approval based on those findings. And third, the proposed placement of trail bollards at points within the easement area where there is ongoing illegal vehicle access. Four proposed locations for the bollards fall within the natural area, again, where structures or improvements are prohibited. In staff's analysis of the easement, we've noted that this prohibition in the easement allows for fences to secure the protected property and to protect the conservation values within the property as long as they don't interfere with the habitat in the highland. If bollards are interpreted to be an equivalent of a fence and protect the natural area from motorized use with a barrier that is less intrusive than a standard fence, then the bollards or even natural boulders in place of bollards are preferable to fences and protecting the conservation values of the property. Staff recommends that the board approve master planning concept but asks the city to use In terms of next steps, city staff intend to seek approval of the master plan at the April 23rd city council meeting. District staff will be present to speak to the district's analysis of the plan. And district staff will continue to be engaged in the ongoing review of the plan and provide timely updates to the board as it moves forward toward final design. And the city of Orono will again seek MCWD board approval through that process. A last note on tonight's action, the board's approval and concept of the master plan does not constitute an endorsement of the project per se or a commitment of financial contribution, only that the plan conforms with the easement with known conditions. The staff is recommending that the city investigate the need for restroom facilities and the complexity of maintenance of the septic system, and to utilize handheld stone boulders to prevent illegal vehicle use on the island, and to assess the need and level of improvement provided by the picnic tables at Point Charming Beach, and then seeking approval and concept of the Big Island Nature Park Master Plan conditioned on those assessments. Any questions?
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Are there questions managers have for Ms. Tomjancic?
I do.
Manager Olson?
Okay, can you go back to your map? At the top, or actually in the center there, it says fish cleaning house relocated to the concrete pad. I'm assuming that is an existing structure?
Manager Olson, yes, that's correct. There's a very old fish cleaning house that is kind of set out in the woods, and people don't see it, and it's a historic structure, and there are some concrete pads where it could be moved to and be near a trail, so you can see it.
Okay, I thought I knew that island. I've never seen it. Okay, and then I also see that there's a third box just to the left of that. What would that be for?
Manager Olson, that's again another concrete pad that's existing from the former.
With no plans?
No plans for that.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. The resolution as drafted calls out one thing, the picnic area. How do you intend, if someone looked at this resolution, they might not know the other requests that you would recommend we make from the city.
Sure.
How do we deal with that?
This is Dwight managers. The picnic table within Point Charming Beach in the natural area is the one item that is prohibited specifically by the easement. It's something that we'd like to have the city of Orono take a look at and consider whether it's necessary at this point. The other two items, the provision of the restroom facilities is allowed within the easement. We just like a little more information from the city of Orono to address that. And again, the trail bollards would be prohibited as structures within the easement. If the district is to interpret those as an alternative to fencing, then that would be allowed within the easement to protect the protected property.
Thank you. Manager Loftus?
Could I ask Mr. Edwards
Certainly.
a question?
Mr. Edwards, would you come forward and identify yourself? Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Have you seen these?
Excuse me, Manager Loftus,
Oh, I'm
could you
sorry.
state your name and your title?
Sure.
Position.
I'm Adam Edwards. I'm the city engineer and director of public works at the city of Orono.
Thank you. Manager Loftus?
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Are these 3 points on the board that we've been talking about something you've had a chance to discuss with Laura, or do you have any initial thoughts on those 3 items? And then my other follow-up question, I don't want to put you on the spot, but in addition to those 3 items, do you have any comment or reassurance regarding the concerns we heard at the public comments? Those would be my 2 questions.
Sure. I guess, so first to start with the restroom facilities. Currently, what we're looking at as far as a proposal there is to use similar restroom facilities that are used by the Three Rivers Park District and the National Park Service at their remote locations. So it's a vaulted toilet, concrete construction type facilities. The one thing I would say is I heard concerns about reinvigorating or reusing the septic site. There's not currently an idea to do that. So it would be their modular single structure facilities, vault type facilities that would be used if we go that route. And
So
the
would
reason for
those be
that is
pumped?
because of the vandalism issues that have been experienced prior, also the maintenance issues. If we tried to put in a plumbed structure out there, the maintenance requirements goes up exponentially, and we just don't have the staff to be able to take care of that.
Would you pump those?
Yes, we'd have to contract to have a septic service pump those, which also we looked at, and that's how many of the homes that are on the island currently are serviced. A lot of them don't have fully functioning type 1 septic, so they do have to have regular pumping.
Okay.
Picnic table at Point Charming, the committee that's been, kind of advising and putting this together looked at trying to re-establish a picnic table there. We pulled the last one out that was there this year in pieces. So and then going back to the vandalism issue, so what we're looking at is if we do put in facilities such as picnic tables, we're not looking at your standard picnic table, but rather concrete rock type structures that are relatively vandal-proof. So that's something that somebody can't just pick up and move. Also looking at trying to do something that would tie in with the more natural feel of the overall park. Trail followers, we're looking just at a number of different options. I think right now the favorite thing that I would most lean towards is using natural stone at those. And again, we're looking at, we had incident even this past winter with vehicular traffic coming up off the ice and driving all over the island. So looking to try to do some other things to deter that type of activity at the island. As you heard Mr. Jabor speak, we've done signs, we've done all kinds of other things. So it's just another attempt at trying to deter that. In combination with that, the other security item we're looking at is some security cameras. That seems to have worked. The other place that had used to experience a lot of vandalism was the Power Squadron just around the bay. Since they installed their security system, they report they haven't had any. So trying to look at some best practices that are used to make those. Did I address all those?
Yeah.
Satisfactory?
Manager Miller?
I think Bill had his hand up
Manager
first.
Becker?
About the picnic tables, are they designed and located in a fashion to reduce other impacts on the natural area?
Right now, they're just conceptual, so we haven't, as is most of this master plan, it's a conceptual plan, so we have not done any of the detailed design or location. I don't know if you had the...
There's the photograph.
Conceptually, this is kind of the photograph of the kind of thing that we're looking at siting up in the center on the top of it.
So would you be opposed to a motion that asked you to return or to take into consideration one of the two? The design and location of picnic tables in a fashion that it improve the protection of the existing natural area? In other words, if today there's widespread use impacting the natural area, the conservation values, sacrificing a bit of it for a picnic area might be a wise choice.
Well, yeah, I think the only place that we've templated a picnic table that would impact or be in the natural area, which Laura mentioned, is at the beach site on the Port Charming beach. And if you've been there, as you approach the beach, you've got a sandy beach, and then you've got a grassy area, kind of flat area before you hit the hill, the slope with where the tree line begins. And so if we cited a picnic table there, I would imagine it would be somewhere in that grassy area, which is where the older picnic tables used to be located.
And that would keep people from spreading out over other parts of the conservation area?
One would hope. I don't know that you can guarantee that. I mean, you see a lot of people, especially along that beach area and in that grass area, that pull their boats up and are sitting in the grass and doing whatever, having picnics and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Manager Miller?
Mr. Wisker, how much did we spend acquiring the site?
About $850,000.
Okay, and then how much have we spent on the two shoreline improvement projects.
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Guess?
Over $1 million.
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody were listening to this presentation tonight, you think we were overly concerned about unimportant things like picnic table locations and all that. What we're really concerned about is maintaining the value of this acquisition, that we use public funds from all over the district, along with the state of Minnesota, to acquire this and preserve this island that was literally being destroyed, and as a natural area. And our concern was belittled to a point where it was described in the newspaper that we were concerned about cutting branches off trees, that we were kind of unreasonable. I think that we're being extremely reasonable with the amount of money we've invested in this park for the city of Orono. And we are going to enforce our easements to the utmost, so that this island is preserved and not just run off as a playground for people that want to create mischief and damage. So I'm not going to vote for any of these improvements. I think it should be left the way it is, and you know, I know there's no one else on the board that supports this, but I'm just looking at the long-term maintenance of this important natural resource, and that's not accessible to 98%, 99% of the people that are paying for it throughout the Watershed district. But that's just my own position.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Manager Loftus.
The second part of my question was about the concern about the cost and the commitment of maintenance in your budget. Are you able to comment on that?
So I guess as far as funding, so one of the drivers for putting together a master plan was to go out and seek funding for the island for these improvements through various park and legacy grants that are available. And Laura hinted to, you know, what is the next steps in this is after the master plan is approved and finalized, the intent is then to use the master plan to go and seek those grants so we can do those improvements. And yes, then the routine maintenance of the island after that, yes, we always need funding in our operating budget to do that. Do we have that today? No. We don't have those facilities to take care of today either, so would I be hopeful that the city would appropriate the money to do that? Absolutely. But I can't guarantee that.
We still have no motion. Is there someone who would like to move this resolution?
Could we ask, Mr. Gerard, are you interested in saying anything? I know you've served the district on our Citizens Advisory and also in another capacity on the Big Island Committee, and I don't know that we've heard your input on the history of this and where it is today and what your thoughts are, but I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. My biggest...
Would you identify yourself and come forward,
Yes.
Brian? Name and address.
Those mics are off.
Are they?
Oh, it's red.
Okay.
My name is Brian Gerard. I'm a resident of Orono. I'm also a member of the Big Island Committee, the Big Island Big Committee, since there's two of them now. I do have a couple concerns. My biggest one is that there does not seem to be any funds right now for operating budget for the island, other than what the island has done right now for the island purchased a lawnmower. We have a storage facility to keep that equipment, to do regular maintenance. Last year there was very little regular maintenance from the perspective of Orno hadn't even looked at trying to take care of those types of things. And I'm concerned that there are no funds for basic operating. Also, I'm also concerned about, it's one thing having a security camera, but if you have no facility to get law enforcement to the area to take care of any issues that may arise, vehicles on the property, or it's a party on the island and bad things start to happen, how does the Orno police get to that area, because the sheriff's department says their jurisdiction ends at the water line. So I think those types of things have to be ironed out before we move on to building too many things on the island. And I also think that we have to have I understand the concept of putting together a plan to get grant funds so that we can address some of the issues like ADA compliant pathways. This was an area that was a veterans park at one time, and veterans do like going there, and we do have, like, one of our members of the committee is in a wheelchair, and we tried to bring him through the park, and it was very, very difficult, and after about a couple hundred yards we kind of gave up and turned around. And I think that is a disservice to those veterans. So from the perspective of doing ADE paths, I think that's a very, very good concept. But again, I think we have to address all of the issues: budget, policing, maintenance, before we start getting on to building things on the island. That's my perspective.
Thank you. We've had a lot of breadth here, but let's bring it back to the terms of the easement and the request before us. Did you have another question?
I had just one last question.
If it's pertinent, yes.
What was the committee's thought or analysis on the need for a restroom? Have there been a lot of requests for a facility, or is there a lot of demand for a restroom? I understand the trails improvement, but I'm curious as why a bathroom? Is there a strong demand for it?
One of the things that we would like to do is turn this into a resource that not only the residents of Orno can utilize, but that it is county-wide place where people can come back. At one point in discussions, it was hoped that we could turn, like with the Veterans Memorial on the island, turn this into a gathering place. And if it's a gathering place, you do have to have some sort of facilities, washroom facilities. Again, at what point does, making a path, well, if you have a number of people on the island utilizing the path, they're going to go to the bathroom somewhere. So you would hope that they would be going to the bathroom in the proper area, or you would have facilities going.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. What would make this resolution satisfactory to the board? Remembering that we are in a form of partnership with the city, that there is an easement, that the city does want to do things, we want to make sure that we keep that dialogue open. Remembering that this is approval in concept only and discounting or accepting the picnic area at Point Charming Beach, knowing that there are issues that will continue to be dealt with, that we're not approving anything, we're not saying we'll fund anything, we're just saying that to this point we think that this can go forward, but for the picnic area. There's a grand silence. No motion? Procedurally, Mr. Smith, would you suggest anything?
Madam President, managers, it is the board's discretion to decide how to move on motions and resolutions.
Thank you. No motion? Is there anybody who would like to amend this in some fashion? All right, there is no motion. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Mr. Whisker.
Is there any direction the board wants staff to take in follow-up?
You'll be attending a meeting on the 23rd, staff will?
Correct. Laura, remind me, the city council meets on April 23rd, and I'm just wondering if there's any direction for staff and follow-up if we're planning to attend that meeting and relay message to the city council.
I guess I don't have an issue with the request. I would like to hear, it was useful to have a representative here to comment on those 3 areas and also to make at least a comment on the concerns we heard, but it would be nice to have an official answer to those. I guess I don't feel an urgency to move on it, given I'm not aware of some timeline that makes it imperative. So I would hope that we could get our questions answered and have the ability to talk about it. I guess I'm not aware of a need to move forward quickly on it, but correct me if I'm wrong.
If you want this, no, I don't think there's any issues other than they going to city council again.
This is not like a permit where we say, these are the rules. They're written down on paper, this is the analysis, we approve or we don't approve. It's not like that. This is more of a conversation, I think, that has to go on between the city and us. Manager Miller?
We in effect control the island with our easements. So if we don't do anything, the easements remain in place as they are with no modification, is that correct?
Madam President, managers, I think you had a detailed presentation and assessment of the various proposed activities and which of them are controlled or prohibited by the easement and which aren't. And so that list is your guidance for answering that question. But I would not say that the easement allows you to restrict or prohibit all of the proposed activities.
Correct.
Okay.
Just the areas of concern and question we can ask. We're allowed to ask those.
And in that regard, all in due course and in your discretion, as you judge to be timely, at some point, a matter of enforcing your conservation easement rights, it's valuable to communicate your concerns as well. So you of course have discretion about how and when to do that.
I would have one question, and that is, I think Gabe's impassioned plea for addressing the issue of the maintenance, and just come to a conclusion that, one, we go ahead and approve the master plan, but perhaps we would like to see some commitment on the part of Orono to fund the maintenance of it, if we're going to take on a process to raise funds and do a project there.
Manager Becker?
I'm concerned about a number of things. One, the form of the resolution. It has us approving the master plan. Our role is to, I think our role, is to determine whether or not the things in the master plan are permitted by the conservation easement. I think also the work that they do should take into consideration design and information dealing with protecting the easement's values. It was evident from the response to my question about the picnic tables and what their function was, that they hadn't considered that they could be used to protect, to maintain the conservation values that the public paid for. And they didn't approach it from that point of view. So I would like to see a resolution that encourages them to approach the island from the point of view of maintaining the conservation values of the conservation area and the values in the recreation area as well.
Great point.
I don't know how to do that.
What else would you want in a resolution?
Let me just say one thing that might ring a bell with some of the board members. There was in the 60s, there was a great concern about the impact in the Glacier National Park Visitor Center of the people parking at the parking lot and walking across the mountain meadow to the visitor center. And the National Park Service took their best minds and put it to what should be done, and they determined that building a boardwalk across the mountain meadow was the right conservation step because it confined people to the boardwalk and they weren't tramping all over the meadow and allowed them to appreciate the meadow at the same time. Yep. And I think it's that kind of attitude that needs to be used in planning the development and use of this island. The number one thing that the public is paid for on this island, is my understanding, is the conservation easement and the restoration of the shoreline. And those ought to be forefront in the minds of the people who are doing the design.
Well, yeah, I feel really uncomfortable not developing a better partnership with Orno, but I think that they've kind of set the tone when they referred to us being concerned about cutting tree limbs off. And I think that misrepresentation of our position to the press, together with there's a current discussion at the city council level of reducing buffers on wetlands, and which kind of gives me a sense of what value the city puts on the value of conservation, as opposed to real estate deals. And you know, I think we need a better understanding of their outlook towards conserving the natural resources that they've been blessed with, which creates most of the value for the city.
So would it be, to answer Mr. Whisker's question, direction to staff to return to the city and tell them we want something that demonstrates their concern for ecological value and that addresses the questions regarding need for maintenance, prevention of vandalism or history of vandalism? I'm trying to find where the sentiment of the board is.
I think the 3 items that Laura had up on the board, I'm not sure why we can't resolve those ahead of approval, why they're after approval. Maybe we are in a hurry, and maybe the plan doesn't need to change, but if they could address those in writing or however. You know, it showed a picture on their plan of swinging gates, but Mr. Edwards, which I appreciate him being here, was comfortable with boulders. Well, great, let's just establish that it's boulders. And if we have a good sense about the picnic table, to manager, to everybody's point, you know, can we really drill down on how that's going to emphasize the natural state and be respectful of the nature area. I guess those are things that are hanging out there that I'm hopeful we can address or get answers to prior to approval. And I guess I'm not sure why we have to move forward without knowing those things.
Manager Olson?
What I think we're all uncomfortable with is that it's an implied endorsement by us.
Yes.
And with all these questions, is it a gate, is it a boulder, is it a fish house, is it a memorial? I mean, if we had a plan from the city that said, this is it, and we don't have the funding yet, and we frankly do need your approval before we can probably go convince people to get the funding. But this is the design carved in stone, not something we wish we had, but something that we won't do unless we do it this way. I think we're going to feel a lot more comfortable because we'll have all those things nailed down. But to say, let's get their endorsement first, and then we'll figure out how much money we have, and then with that kind of money, we'll figure out what we can get, that makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Especially when the resolution says we're endorsing the master plan.
Right.
I'll move that we table the resolution.
There's no motion, there's nothing to table, but we can just decide not to act on it.
Could we make a motion now? I mean, the item, are we?
Well, it's just a procedural issue, you can't table, you can table a motion, you can't table an item. You can.
That's a new definition for me.
Yeah, because I think the board could move to lay over.
Lay over, certainly.
On the table.
You want to arm wrestle on this one?
That takes a motion to bring it back up.
Lay down on the table.
Yes, unless the motion would bring it to a date certain.
Should we have a motion or just a direction to staff to return to the city and ask that questions be resolved, the questions we've discussed, and the elements that we want ecological value to drive the bus?
Yes.
And the resolution be amended or changed in our packet before it comes back to not accept the concept plan, but, or not endorse it, but to note its compliance
Right.
with our conservation zone.
We're establishing a precedent on what we will allow in natural area conservation easements.
Just for point of information, the motion does say to approve the concept plan. It does not say to approve the master plan. This is one piece, and that's the concept plan, right, that drawing?
Correct. Mayor President White, managers, I'll just clarify that the resolution itself is approval in concept. So it's approval of the existing state of the plan, existing draft of the plan.
Approval in concept of the concept plan. It doesn't say approval of the master plan.
The city
Is it the
refers
same
to it
thing?
as the master plan,
I see.
concept plan. This is the
Okay.
concept plan phase of the master plan.
May I, Mr. Whisker has his hand up, and I'll come back to you, Manager Becker.
Sure.
All right, no, okay, fine.
No,
Manager
that's-
Becker.
Is there a way to make the resolution resolve that the actions taken by the city of Orono are in keeping with the conservation easement requirements?
There you go.
And I think that's a different question to vote on.
Yep.
I would vote on that.
It's actually harder to vote on that.
I don't understand what the motion would be. That the city must have a plan that is in keeping, or that we see, or we think this is in keeping? I'm not sure. which
That
one.
we think it's in keeping with the rights we obtained when we bought the conservation easement.
And you think that?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was getting. Mr. Whisker?
I was trying to tie it up a little bit, and I think I understand where Manager Becker's going is, and I look for Lewis for some guidance since we drafted the resolution in coordination with legal counsel, but I understand Manager Becker's point to be the board wants to act to find the plan elements either in conformance with the easement or not, and you want us to go back to the city and on these three specific elements get additional detail so that you are comfortable that the picnic benches, the bollards, the toilets will be in conformance with the easement the way it's drafted. And in that posture, you're not approving the master plan. You're making a finding on elements in master plan's conformance with the easement documents. Is that what we're going for?
I think In summary, yes.
But include the request to understand their commitment to maintenance, and also to make sure our resolution details the understanding of the conservation easement, and that if the picnic table, if they won't take the picnic table out of there, you know, what Manager Becker said earlier, all of his points on how it should be considered and the viewpoint it should be looked at from, if we could include that in the resolution.
To nitpick that, didn't you say, Mr. Omyachich, the picnic table would not be in conformance at all?
That's correct.
Not in any form, according to our easement? Because it's in the natural area, and it's a structure.
President White, that's correct, yes.
And we've shared that concern with Orono, and they want to keep it in there.
Minnehaha is, yes, and yeah, I think their sense is that that's already a disturbed area. It is used as a public beach, and so it makes sense to provide a picnic facility at that point, even though it is within.
Mr. Whisker?
Well, are they willing to consider Manager Becker's point about how a picnic table can complement or enhance a natural area and the design of such, given it doesn't fit in there? I mean, that's the one element we could say no to, or they could give some more thought to from our perspective.
It's a long way from the recreation boundaries. See, it's in the middle of the natural easement, that's the primary issue.
Do you want to do this by motion, a motion that follows the lines of Mr. Summary, or do we just want to direct staff, have them take the concepts that we've talked about and take it back to discussion with the city?
Let's have them take it back to the city. Do we need to make a motion to do that?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, just direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Omyachich, Mr. Whisker, and Mr. Gerard.
Thank you.
Next item is 10.1, Resolution 18-036, Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam President, managers. We are bringing back to you the 2017 annual financial audit, and this point in time seeking the board's acceptance of the audit. At our last meeting on March 22nd, Mr. Mark Gibbs from Redpath, the company that did the audit for us, gave a presentation to both the executive committee and to the board as a whole on the audit, and additionally you were provided copies of the audit that you could review and peruse at your leisure over the last 3 weeks. And so now we are back and we are seeking the board's acceptance of that 2017 annual financial audit. If you have any questions, we can try and address them at this point in time. But
Is there a motion to adopt the resolution accepting the 2017 financial audit?
So moved.
Manager Miller, is there a second? Manager Becker. Any questions for Ms. Reynolds? Any discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
thank you.
We'll move to item 10.2, Resolution 18-037, regarding the employee handbook. Ms. Reynolds again.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, managers. This is where we are seeking to implement amendments and some changes to our employee handbook. The entire handbook was adopted or was completed back in October of 2015.
Excuse me, I don't think it was adopted.
No. I believe, Manager Miller, that is correct. I believe there was a resolution that was completed earlier that gave the district administrator, in conjunction with, and I have a copy of it here, in conjunction with legal counsel and I believe it was human resources consultant to go forward and complete the handbook. It said update, complete, and maintain the employee handbook in accordance with the applicable legal requirements and as the rules and protocols for management of the human resources function of the district operations. So there was never, that was the resolution. It gave the authority to them to go forward. The handbook as a whole was never brought back to the board, is my understanding, but it was completed and put into place as the operating employee handbook for the district in October of 2015.
Thank you. Can it wait?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. With that concept, we have the language of the previous resolution back in 2015. We have some amendments that we would like to make to the handbook, and we wanted to bring those back to the board because they are some policy changes that would occur to it. So we are seeking the board's approval of those amendments. In addition, we are looking to redoing the entire handbook and doing a complete rewrite probably of the handbook, and hoping to have that back to the board for the board's approval probably within the next, I'm going to say 90 to 120 days. I know I put 120 in here to give me a little bit more time to try and work through that process. So at this point in time, what we're really looking at is to really seek the adoption or the amendments and approval of these amendments as the policy changes that allow our district administrator to move forward with the full implementation of the HR plan and really kind of put that process and his authorities in that HR plan, and I believe in accordance with kind of the guidance that was discussed at the board's offsite in February.
Thank you. Manager Miller?
I'll move adoption of the recommendation and that the manual be referred after these amendments be approved, but the manual in its entirety be referred to the Operations and Committee so that it could be examined rather than just presented to the board at a board meeting and with no time for discussion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Becker? Given that we have a strategic plan implementation schedule set out in front of us, and that part of that is HR, and that these changes will facilitate the district administrator complying with the timelines and schedules and requirements that we have made, I am in support of this resolution making these changes now.
Yeah, that was my motion, I believe.
I'm supporting your motion.
Oh, okay.
I'm not making a motion or a second. That's been done. I'm supporting your motion.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Rollins.
Thank you.
Item 10.3, Resolution 18-038, approval of respondents for advanced interview, 325 Lake Road. Mr. Hayman.
I believe somebody was here for this matter, and they're not in the room right now. Did they leave?
He may have, yes.
Okay.
Chair White, managers, would you like me to pause or wait? I would imagine we'll be back
I
shortly.
think it would be a courtesy because they've been sitting through all the other.
We will pause.
Uh-oh.
Oh, never mind.
Sounds like bowling alley. You still here?
No, I don't think no.
Do you think he's left the building? He said yes.
The restroom.
Move forward.
On another issue then. I
believe he's.
Okay,
there we
good.
go, okay.
Excellent.
Good evening, Chair White, managers. I am here this evening Seeking approval to advance respondents to the interview portion for the 325 Blake Road Master Developer Selection process. You will recall, I won't give the full recap of the RFQ process to date at this moment, but you'll recall that on March 8th, the board authorized us to move into phase 2, which is to request a supplemental, or to proceed with a supplemental information request. We did that in mid or late March, on March 21st, with about a 10-day period of turnaround, and did receive responses from all 5 firms that were remaining. You may recall that supplemental information request focused on providing additional vision, financial considerations, and any contingencies in order to just provide a little bit more clarity. There was some uncertainty, sort of a mixed response from the first round, and I think that that in essence, the overview, I think that the request did exactly what we had designed it in terms of delivery. It certainly resulted in common information across all of the developers. We had more clarity from the developers that maybe we didn't have as much information on their vision or what some of the contingencies may be. So there certainly was a greater confidence in understanding the position of each of the developers and how we would look to proceed with each one of them. Part of the documents in your packet, there's a tracking document that compiled all that information concisely in order for folks to be able to review this, because it was a pretty quick turnaround on all of these reviews with the joint working group and subcommittee, et cetera. So the information was presented to the joint working group, which is the subcore of the 3 managers and two members. They reviewed that on April 4th and discussed a little bit more detail about what each of the developers' visions and considerations and contingencies meant for the site, and how it maybe aligned or what was in alignment and what may be lacking with the vision that the city and its partners have set forth. And the group determined that they had confidence in reducing the number down to 3, that they felt that there were 3 that sort of stood out above and beyond in terms of meeting that. So their recommendation was to bring forward Anderson Companies, Doran, and Krause Anderson to the Southwest Subcommittee for advice, and the Board of Managers this evening for review, based on what they felt was a strong alignment with the vision of the Greenway, the Blake Corridor, and the community's input. So yesterday at the Southwest Community Works Subcommittee, we discussed the Joint Working Group recommendation, provided them with all the same information that the Joint Working Group had, and just had a discussion about community engagement and some of the other components that we felt were going to be integral to the process moving forward as we get into the interview process, and some of the things we'd want to potentially dig a little bit deeper on. The subcommittee passed a motion to endorse the Joint Working Group recommendation for the board's recommendation or consideration this evening, and they also reviewed the draft interview process and passed a motion endorsing that as well. To give you a brief synopsis on the interview process, I know we'll be presenting more information to the board offline through email to talk a little bit more about themes and questions and some things we may want to get into, but we do know the date for the interviews will be May 9th, likely hosted here. We're still in some conversations about that, but I think this location will work fine. The joint working group will be the panel that will facilitate the interview portion of that process. So there'll be a presentation for approximately 20-25 minutes, and then a interview portion which will have question, answer, discussion sort of format. The subcommittee members will be present as observers, will participate or will listen to the first 3 hours, which would be the 3 interviews that are scheduled, and then participate as sort of advisors to the joint working group as they deliberate on potential selection of a master developer following the interview process. So timeline in terms of the direction we've gone so far, we're essentially down in the 4th tier now. The first are just highlighting when the RFQ was released, the different points at which the board has moved forward. Tonight we're looking at consideration of respondents to enter into the interview process, at which point we'll distribute material to the respondents that remain sometime in late April, try to provide a couple of weeks for them to prepare for that interview process, which would occur on the 9th of May, and hopefully have a master developer selection recommendation from the joint working group for the board on the 24th of May. This is the schedule you're familiar with seeing. I just wanted to highlight at that point we would likely begin to negotiate terms and conditions, and that would be anywhere from a 60 to 90 day window to see where we're at with the master developer and the the team that we select to move forward. So with that, this evening, staff is recommending that we proceed with the 3 master developer candidates. I should state that the joint working group is recommending that the board proceed with the 3 developer candidates, Anderson Companies, Doran, and Kraus Anderson, and initiate the interview portion of the master developer selection process.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt the resolution.
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager
Madam
Loftus?
President?
Yes.
Could I just offer a suggestion? If you
Certainly.
look at the last, second to the last whereas paragraph that refers to the subcommittee's meeting on April 11th, given that the subcommittee voted to support the process, I think it'd be good to note that in the resolution. So you might just continue that paragraph by saying, and the subcommittee voted to support this recommendation of the joint working group. And that way our resolution acknowledges their support as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That works for you guys? Okay.
Great idea.
Any questions for Mr. Heeman?
I just, looking at all this timeline and everything, it would suggest almost a process without purpose, but what we've been able to accomplish is great support at the city and the surrounding cities, as well as the county, because they're all going to be impacted financially or otherwise by this. And it's with the help that we've been getting from our consultant, NTH, I think we've got really a fine process, and we've got some wonderful choices to work with, and I think we're going to end up with a very fine process and a good selection when we do get there. We couldn't be more pleased with the groups that have been selected and what we're going to be working with, and I think it's going to be a kind of not everybody's got a model, but at least a model for a watershed district involved in community development. But I think that we're doing it right, and we're going to end up with a good product.
I think you're right. Any other questions? Any comments?
I have one
Manager
question,
Rogers?
and that is that I'm wondering if it's okay for people that are not part of that committee to audit the proceedings of the interview.
Thank you for your question. Mr. Smith, you had something to say too, I think.
Yes, Madam President. First, to answer Manager Rognus's question, the intent of the process is to make sure that all of the information about each of the developers is available to the entire board. And that, however, the proposed interview process is one to be done in a closed session with less than a quorum of both the board and city council present. And so the recommendation is that other members of the board of managers would not be present, but would be having access to all the other information, and then hear a discussion about the recommendation from the joint working group that's presented then to the board of managers.
Thank you.
And we did have a discussion in committee of you have many options for how to do this process, but it'd be important that you're comfortable with that approach.
And you were going to say something else?
I just wanted to double check on who seconded the motion.
I did. Manager Loftus.
Thank you.
I had already forgotten. Anything else for Mr. Heeman? Manager Becker.
I have a question for Counselor. Is this proceeding documented? The proceeding, not the decision.
Madam President, Manager Becker, my understanding is that it will be documented in the sense that there may be notes, the presentations of the respective developers, I suspect, will be information that can be made available. I do not expect that there would be either a tape recording or detailed minutes of the proceeding.
So there are contemporaneous notes of the members of the...
Probably, yeah, but probably the most important thing would be that the presentation materials would be made available to the board.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Are we ready to vote? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Heyman. Good work. Resolution 10.5, I'm sorry, item 10.5, resolution 18-040, we have Ms. Cermak. I haven't skipped anything, have I? Don't famous for that. No, I guess we're okay.
See that?
All right. Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. I'm here tonight to present Resolution 18-040, authorization to purchase stormwater monitoring equipment. I'm going to be running through the research and monitoring's program evolution stemming from the strategic planning process and how we've been utilizing monitoring plans to kind of assist in that new direction. And then I'll walk through, how this equipment is actually used and why it's so valuable, along with how we're going to really be utilizing it at Arden Park and along Minnehaha Creek. So stemming from the strategic planning process, it really highlighted for the research and monitoring staff that resources needed to be shifted towards project support. So for us, it was really a matter of changing the scale and how we monitor. So previously we had, question?
We're not going to be subject to pictures of the administrator on every presentation, are we?
Just on this slide.
Okay, all right.
His humble beginnings.
Before Facebook.
Tangent.
No, actually, that was his first project.
It didn't work too well.
It's broken.
He broke it by too much weight on top. Should never climb that.
So everyone's in a receptive mood now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in order to kind of shift gears and scale our monitoring towards this project support, we really had to find ways to make our anchor baseline monitoring more efficient to free up those resources. So we've really been trying to focus all the monitoring primarily on issue identification. Where do projects need to be put in place? And then when we have a known issue, is there a way we can, through monitoring, better characterize that issue in order to support, project design and project management? So one way we've been doing that is through the development of these project-specific monitoring plans. The program does have a year-long monitoring plan that covers district-wide activities. So these are kind of nested within that. And instead of following, the actual annual year, it's really following the timeline of a project instead. So it's tracking how many years do we have to do pre-project monitoring versus how many years do we have to do post-project monitoring. What parameters should we be including, and really clearly outlining for the project manager what deliverables they need from us at what phases of the project. So just to kind of give you an example of why stormwater kind of really fits into that, especially when we're talking about Minnehaha Creek. I'm going to talk about Powell Road here. So as we noted, this is James standing on the Powell Road pipe. 2 years ago, the board did approve purchasing this exact same set of equipment to put in within the Powell Road pipe as well as the Lake Street pipe. And this was to collect pre-project data for 325 Lake Road project. So we have 2 years of solid data now. We're about to enter into our third and final year of the pre-project data collection. And what we're already seeing just from 2 years of data, compared to what the model had predicted here, we're seeing higher phosphorus concentrations moving through this pipe. We're seeing a greater percentage of particulate phosphorus compared to dissolved than what the model had predicted. So things like that is what we get out of this stormwater monitoring that will really guide the design once we get to that phase. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what this equipment really looks like put in place. So this is at the Powell Road station. Every site has a job box like this located right next to an accessible manhole. This is Wank giving us some assistance with the confined space entry training because we don't have that certification. So he's actually going into the 4-foot Powell Road pipe that runs right where that arrow is into the creek, and he's putting our velocity sensor in place right at the bottom of the pipe. And that's what's giving us our continuous flow readings, our continuous velocity readings, along with installing the pump tubing that's going to be collecting the sample. All of that runs underground into the box, and inside we have an ISCO automatic sampler, which is on the left. This is what actually collects the samples. We are repurposing those at all of these new locations from past projects. And then the brains of the operation, and what we're really asking for funding for tonight, is these little blue boxes. And they look simple, but they truly are what make this really function correctly. So from in the office, I can at any time pull up exactly what level and what flow is moving through this pipe. Depending on what rain event is moving through, if it's an inch event or a half an inch, with the click of a button, I can tell this sampler exactly when I'd like it to go on and trigger. And then the coolest thing is actually that this can communicate with me. So tonight we're supposed to maybe get some rain. I'll likely get a text message from Lake Street Sampler that it went off at 5 a.m. And that kind of helps me, plan the day, plan how many teams we need to deploy throughout the district, instead of us sending out staff to just physically check if they went off. So it's a huge time saver. And then this is what the actual kind of samples look like inside that machine. It breaks it up within 24 bottles, and that allows us to really tease apart what part of the storm we're seeing those high spikes. Is it actually in that first flush like we would predict, or are we seeing kind of a steady rush of phosphorus through the entire storm? So how we plan on using this in Arden Park, we have a pretty established monitoring plan set up that we've been working with Renee on. A lot of ecological metrics are within the creek and right around the creek itself. And we have a pretty good set of the pre-project data ecologically wise. The biggest remaining piece is the stormwater. So if you look at that yellow dot, that's where we're going to be putting in the equipment. And you'll notice there's two parallel pipes running. We're going to be monitoring just this northern pipe, which brings all of this north drainage area. This catchment 86 runs to the southern pipe. Just to kind of cut back on resources, and this equipment is expensive, we're going to be using all the information we gained from the northern pipe and kind of extrapolate it and apply it to kind of the same landscape type that's coming through the lower pipe. That monitoring will be done all through this year, and then this filtration system will go in place over winter, and we will kind of move the equipment in order to assess the outlet of that system all of 2019 and 2020. So in Minnehaha Creek, just to kind of give you a frame of reference, in Minneapolis alone, there's over 100 outfalls into the creek. So this outfall study really highlighted, okay, of those outfalls, which ones are really bringing in a lot of nutrients to the creek and therefore would benefit greatly from a project. So 13 outfalls were recognized through this study. So to monitor this, we're kind of doing two parts. One is going to be monitoring our in-stream concentrations. It's going to kind of act as our control, if you will, measuring the cumulative effect of all these 100 outfalls as you work your way through Minneapolis. So it'll be a similar setup. They're going to have a box right next to the creek. We're just going to be utilizing some older equipment that we have. The new equipment will actually be placed at 2 of these 13 BMP sites within a pipe, directly sampling the actual drainage area coming through the pipe. We're working with Tiffany still to prioritize which 2 we should start with, looking at what's the cost benefit of each project. Is there a lot of partner interest in specific projects? How does it fit into the Park Board's master plan for the Parkway? So we're getting that finalized, and these would be put in place this summer, and we would begin our 2-year monitoring for sure by this summer, and then do a solid 2019-2020 2-year pre-project assessment. What's nice here is once we finish that 2 years, we can pick up this equipment and keep moving it to other BMP sites along the creek. So with that, staff is recommending that we authorize the district administrator to approve the purchase of the stormwater monitoring equipment.
Thank you. Is there a motion to
Take-
adopt the resolution? Manager Miller, is there a second? Second. Manager Olson, Manager Miller.
I saw the one behind Japs Olson just yesterday, and I couldn't figure out what that job box was about. And what, and most people driving by it would think it's full of tools, and it would be subject to
Curiosity.
either vandalism or stealing it. How is it fixed? I mean, if we're spending that kind of money and put it in a job box, how do we make sure that somebody doesn't think it's a...
Could you put decoys, like high voltage on it or something?
Manager Miller, managers, we have thought about that. The job boxes are anchored very heavily into the ground to kind of help with that, and they are locked. So we've never had an issue to date of stuff with inside a job box being vandalized.
Okay.
Manager Olson?
Those are the same ones we use for baseball equipment at the parks over here. In the box, I saw the 12-volt battery, the car battery.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the only power source?
Manager Olson, managers, as of now, yes, we've stuck with just deep cycle batteries to charge all of this equipment. We've thought about the idea of putting in solar panels due to kind of the vandalism risk, and you'd still need a battery in there.
How do you keep it charged?
So this equipment actually also sends me a text message when battery drops below 11 volts. So anytime I get that text message, we have a supply already charged in the lab, and we just go out and exchange it.
Swap batteries?
Mm-hmm.
How often is that done?
About once a season, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is really good stuff.
Was there another question? I was thinking how valuable it is to have the data coming in all the time, so that if something did happen, you wouldn't lose a lot of information.
Yes, President White, we've, being able to download it frequently, we're constantly able to see, is the equipment still functioning? You know, it's not a month later when we realize there's a problem. So, you know, this is a new process for us. We're just getting into stormwater, but it's been a really fun learning process, and I think going to be really valuable moving forward.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
James got to come.
Aye. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Did you have a comment to add, Mr. Whisker?
I did. I just wanted to note for the board that's Kelly's first presentation to the board in her new position as Research and Monitoring Coordinator, and I think we're really excited to have her knowledge and enthusiasm in this position. And you can probably tell from the presentation she's hit the ground running.
You bet.
Well, the record reflects you got unanimous approval.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item of business is a discussion item about MAUD priorities. Mr. Whisker.
Yes. President White, managers, there is a memo in your packet outlining or framing the question for you tonight. I was informed after the March legislative briefing that I wasn't able to attend with the Minnesota Association of Watershed Administrators, that that group agreed to go back to their respective watershed boards and solicit feedback on potential 3-year priorities for MAUD. As I'd outlined in the memo, MAUD's received a ton of input over the last 3 years in developing their strategic plan, and I'd incorporated as attachments to the memo some summary fact sheets on what those strategic priorities are. I've covered for you in the document their vision, mission, and like I said, strategic priorities. And one of their big focuses moving forward is really on education, educating their membership, and I've listed and attached their training work plan. So really, you're being asked, do you have any ideas on the top 3 things MAUD must accomplish in 2018, or the top 3 things MAUD must accomplish in the next 3 years? And from my perspective, they have a strategic plan. They've got a lot of feedback. They seem to be working the plan pretty rigorously. I'm getting a lot of email updates. I'm trying to pass those along to you. You've got a handout at your desk for the MAUD Summer Tour, save the date. So I don't have any suggestions for you. I know President White is on the board. She might want to comment, but really this is just an information item to see if you've got any feedback from Maud at this point based on the input you've provided previously, the plan they've developed. If you've got any way to give them focus, we'll take it and we'll route that through Mr. Henderson at Sauk River Watershed.
Thank you. Thoughts? In the Region 3 meeting at the annual meeting, Region 3 being Metro, there was a lot of dissatisfaction expressed with the fact that we had more dues than benefits in people's assessment. And so, more dues than benefits. And I think that, and of course, we had that discussion here as well. I think that there's a great deal of work that they have lined up to do, but it's really important to demonstrate or present or future ideas that would be of benefit to the Metro District, Metro area.
I would also add that our administrator and our staff has voiced detailed concerns over the grant money methodology right now that's at stake, and how the multiple county involvement is a pretty weak approach, and to get that nailed down and to be more finalized with the state would be a better plan for Bowser, I should say.
That's good feedback.
Any other thoughts? They've certainly outlined a really comprehensive list of training topics, but when I went through it, I honestly thought that we know it all. Well, okay, that's not quite right. Are there resources or training subjects that would be helpful for us? Well, that was a short discussion, I think. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll take that feedback and we'll send that off. Thank you.
Next item of business is the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker again.
President White, managers, hopefully a pretty brief report. This week, there's a number of events on the agenda that you see in front of you, and we've got board members and staff at some of those events this evening, so those are there for your reference. One note, we have responded to Bowser's biennial budget request, the 2020-2021. As you know, that's something that we do pretty routinely. It's used for initial screening of grants. We've submitted, with emphasis, the list of projects that you've approved in the 6 Mile Creek, Halsted Bay, the watershed plan, and work within Minnehaha Creek. Moving on, in terms of spring, Tiffany Schaffler sent an email yesterday to communities, I believe was forwarded out to the board, just regarding creek flows, ice in, ice out, this crazy late winter that we're having. And she had outlined that the National Weather Service is predicting 1 to 2 inches coming up. We don't know what kind of form that precipitation is coming in. It might rain, it might snow, we might get more ice, we might get all three. And she had highlighted that the lake level right now for Minnetonka is currently sitting at 929.01. The ordinary high is 929.4, so there's nothing alarming there, but we are being proactive, and we received our permit today from the Department of Natural Resources to begin aerating around Grays Bay, so we can start flow. As you know, Nokomis has been the subject of scrutiny in South Minneapolis with water levels and groundwater issues, and there's been a lot of dialogue around trying to get the Nokomis Weir open as early as possible. It is open. It'll likely be closed over the weekend preemptively because there'll be flow in the creek from the rain, and then it'll be opened back up again after that flow passes through. I do have for you tonight a fact sheet that I'll hand out to take with you for your reference that Tiffany put together in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources, the City of Minneapolis, Park Board, of course the district. It's really just a fact sheet answering what some of the questions are that are being asked for around the Nokomis area. Other than that, there's some meetings that I attended recently. We had a successful Parks Commission meeting with the City of Edina to review about 50% plans for Arden Park. Laura Delmiancic, Renee Clark, Manager Miller, and myself attended that. The City Council seems pleased with progress, and we're continuing to move that project forward. You've been briefed on the Blake Road Joint Working Group and Subcommittee, so I don't need to get into that. And then tomorrow, Manager Olson and I have a scheduled meeting with Carver County Commissioner Malushnik to give him an update on our program in 6 Mile Creek, Halstead Bay, and just talk to him about ideas moving forward. And we've put together an updated fact sheet for that geography for you that we'll be taking with us, so you can take a peek at that. And that is all I have for you, unless there's questions.
Are there questions, Mr. Whisker?
I just want to comment that I think these kinds of brochures are really helpful on current topics, and it's good summaries and good graphics, and really appreciate it.
I'll pass it along. Yeah, Tiffany's been working really closely and getting a lot of support from communications, obviously, and pulling these together. And I think, the one with the partners is really a value add. We've got the Department of Natural Resources, Park Board, and City sharing a ton of technical information. There's questions coming from